Not my woman, no.
And I would never, ever, ever use a lie. Ain't now one of them niggas stepped up and said they hit this. Use a goddamn lie. What you saying, Jonathan?
I'm saying I need you to be a mother, not a networker, not a baddie, not a squawker, not a motherfucker.
I'm not about to let nobody in no club jump on my back over.
This wasn't a clapback. This wasn't a casual response. This was a public emotional crack that made people stop scrolling like their phone just delivered bad news. Because when fans turn on a celebrity's parent, it hits different. It's not just drama anymore. It's personal. And this time, the pressure didn't just rise, it detonated. For years, Blueface's mom has been loud, unapologetic, and right in the middle of every headline she could find, she spoke her mind, defended her position, and doubled down every time. Critics tried to check her, but something changed. The tone shifted, the comments got harsher, the patience disappeared, and suddenly, the internet wasn't clapping back, it was closing in. Fans didn't just criticize, they called out. Patterns, old clips resurfaced, past comments were replayed with fresh outrage. And what used to be defended as just being real started sounding a lot like something else entirely. The backlash stacked up fast, and the pressure didn't come from one place. It came from everywhere. That's when the cracks showed. Emotion spilled out, control slipped, and the woman who once seemed untouchable suddenly looked overwhelmed by the very audience she used to spar with. Because when public opinion flips this hard, it doesn't whisper, it roars. And once it does, there's no mute button. The internet has a habit of turning background characters into main villains overnight. And this time, the spotlight swung hard in a direction nobody expected. Blueface's mom wasn't always the target. For a long time, she was treated like a side character with a loud voice, someone fans rolled their eyes at but still listened to. She was outspoken, unapologetic, and never shy about jumping into the mess when her son's name was trending. That energy used to be tolerated. Sometimes it was even cheered. But tolerance on the internet has an expiration date, and hers quietly ran out. At first, the criticism came in small waves, a comment here, a reaction video there, fans questioning her tone, her involvement, her constant presence in Blueface's chaos. Nothing explosive. Just murmurs, the kind people ignore until they realize those murmurs are stacking up. What used to be brushed off as a mom being protective started sounding, to many viewers, like something far more controlling. Then the receipts started resurfacing. Old clips that once felt harmless were replayed with a colder lens. Comments she made months ago were suddenly dragged back into the spotlight, stripped of context, and rebranded as proof of a pattern. The internet loves patterns, especially when it wants justification for outrage. And once that narrative took shape, everything she said or did got filtered through it. Fans began asking uncomfortable questions. Why was she always in the middle? Why did every situation seem to escalate when she spoke? Why did her involvement feel less supportive and more inflammatory? These weren't haters looking for drama. These were people who had followed the story for a long time and felt something wasn't sitting right anymore. The shift was subtle but deadly. Support didn't disappear in a dramatic wave. It eroded. Defenders went quiet. Comment sections that once echoed with agreement started filling with criticism. The jokes stopped landing. The excuses stopped working. And the internet, once amused, started sounding fed up. What really accelerated the backlash was how public everything became. Nothing stayed private. Every reaction was posted. Every emotion was broadcast. Fans felt like they were watching a family dispute play out in front of them with no boundaries, no filter, and no off switch. And when people feel forced into witnessing something uncomfortable, they don't stay neutral for long. The pressure didn't come from one viral moment. It came from accumulation, weeks of tension, months of unresolved conflict, years of chaotic cycles that fans were suddenly tired of excusing. And once that fatigue sets in, the tone flips fast. What used to be entertaining becomes irritating. What used to be defended becomes questioned. Blueface's mom tried to push back at first. She spoke her truth. She doubled down. She addressed critics directly, the same way she always had, but this time, the response felt different. The crowd wasn't engaging in arguments anymore. They weren't debating, they were condemning. And that's a harder wall to punch through. As the backlash intensified, the emotional toll became impossible to hide. Her responses lost their edge, her tone wavered. Frustration bled through in ways it hadn't before. The woman who once looked unbothered by criticism now looked exhausted by it. That shift didn't go unnoticed. Fans started pointing out the cracks. They noticed hesitation. They noticed defensiveness turning into vulnerability. They noticed moments where her confidence slipped and something raw showed through. That's when the narrative fully changed. This wasn't just about behavior anymore. It was about pressure pushing someone to their limit in real time. What made the situation even messier was how intertwined everything was with Blueface himself. Fans weren't just reacting to her actions in isolation. They were connecting them to his struggles, his controversies, his constant public chaos, whether fair or not. People started framing her as part of the problem instead of part of the support system. That framing spread fast. Reaction videos leaned into it. Commentary accounts amplified it. Suddenly, she wasn't just a mom defending her son. She was a recurring figure in every meltdown, every argument, every headline. The internet loves a symbol, and she became one. The pressure built from every angle. Critics, fans, strangers who didn't even follow the story but jumped in once it started trending. The pylon effect kicked in. And once that happens, logic takes a back seat to momentum. Every comment added weight. Every repost tightened the grip. By the time her emotional response finally broke through, it felt inevitable. This wasn't a sudden breakdown. It was the result of sustained scrutiny, relentless criticism, and the exhausting reality of being judged by millions who feel entitled to an opinion. When she finally cracked, it wasn't shocking. It was the natural outcome of a pressure cooker with no release valve. And that's what made this moment hit so hard. Fans weren't just reacting to a breakdown. They were realizing they helped create it. The internet rarely pauses to acknowledge that part, but this time, even some critics hesitated. Because watching someone unravel under public pressure forces an uncomfortable reflection. Still, the damage was done. Sympathy mixed with judgment. Concern collided with criticism. And the story took on a new dimension. This wasn't just about calling someone out anymore. It was about what happens when public pressure turns personal and there's nowhere left to hide. By the end of this phase, one thing was clear: the internet had officially turned. And once that switch flips, there's no going back to the way things were. The only question left was how far the fallout would go. Once the backlash reached critical mass, the internet did what it always does when it smells blood in the water. It stopped asking questions and started passing judgment. This was the phase where the story stopped belonging to Blueface's mom and started belonging to everyone else. Clips were reposted out of context. Old screenshots resurfaced like they'd been waiting in a folder labeled "Use Later." And suddenly, the narrative wasn't about one moment. It was about a lifetime of moments stitched together into something far uglier. Memes hit first, because humor is how the internet pretends it isn't being cruel. But these weren't playful jokes. They were sharp, sarcastic, and dripping with moral superiority. People laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laughter that releases tension. It was the kind that tightens it. The comments underneath told the real story. She deserves it. She's been doing this for years. About time someone said something. That's when it became clear the crowd wasn't venting anymore. It was convicting. Reaction channels poured gasoline on it. Thumbnails screamed exposed and "this is sick," as if they just uncovered a conspiracy instead of reacting to the same recycled clips everyone else had already seen. Influencers leaned back in their chairs, sighed dramatically, and spoke in that fake concerned voice people use when they're about to say something ruthless. Concern became performance, and performance became profit. The wild part was how fast the tone escalated. 1 minute it was criticism. The next minute, it was character assassination. Fans stopped separating actions from identity. everything she did became evidence. Every word became ammunition. Even silence was treated like guilt, especially silence, because on the internet, not responding is never neutral. It's either arrogance or admission, depending on who's watching. Celebrity is and voices joined in next. Not directly, of course. Nobody wanted to be on record, but vague posts started appearing everywhere. Quotes about toxic family dynamics, stories about knowing when to step back, tweets about protecting your peace that were so obviously aimed, they might as well have been tagged. Each one added legitimacy to the outrage without taking responsibility for it. Then came the pop culture comparisons, because nothing says seriousness like turning real people into metaphors. People compared the situation to reality TV matriarchs who thrive on control. Others joked that this was a masterclass in how not to support someone publicly. Someone even said this made scripted drama look restrained. The exaggerations were funny until they weren't, because buried under them was a growing sense of discomfort. The most dangerous shift happened when empathy completely split. Half the audience said the backlash was overdue. The other half said it was cruel. And instead of talking to each other, both sides talked past each other, louder every time. Nuance died quickly. You were either on the side of accountability or the side of enabling. There was no middle ground. Left. As the outrage peaked, fans began projecting. People didn't just criticize her behavior. They connected it to their own experiences: bad parents, overbearing relatives, controlling figures in their lives. The story stopped being about one person and turned into a dumping ground for unresolved trauma. That's when things get messy, because personal pain doesn't care about fairness. Every response she made was torn apart in real time. If she defended herself, she was playing the victim. If she apologized, it was too late or fake. If she tried to explain, it was making excuses. There was no acceptable answer because the audience wasn't looking for resolution. It was looking for validation. And through all of this, the pressure intensified, not just from critics, but from expectation. People expected her to break, expected her to cry, expected her to collapse under the weight of public judgment. And when cracks started to show, instead of slowing down, the internet leaned in closer. The irony was brutal. Fans demanded accountability while participating in a pylon that offered no path forward. They wanted growth but punished vulnerability. They wanted responsibility but thrived on humiliation. The louder the outrage got, the more it revealed about the crowd itself. By the time the backlash reached its loudest point, the story had mutated beyond recognition. What started as criticism of behavior turned into a referendum on her character, her role as a mother, and her place in the public eye. The pressure wasn't just public anymore. It was relentless. And hanging over everything was the same unspoken question no one wanted to answer. At what point does calling someone out turn into tearing them down? The internet hates that question because it forces self-reflection. And self-reflection doesn't trend out. As the outrage cycle peaked, something subtle but important happened. People stopped reacting emotionally and started watching strategically, waiting for the next response, the next slip, the next confirmation that their outrage was justified. That shift marked the transition from chaos to consequence. When the outrage finally lost its volume, it didn't fade into forgiveness. It hardened into reputation. The noise softened, but the judgment stayed. That's the part nobody prepares for. Because silence feels like relief until you realize it's actually permanence. The internet didn't forget. It just stopped yelling and started remembering. Public perception had officially shifted. Blueface's mom was no longer seen as just outspoken or protective. She was now framed as a central figure in a larger narrative people had grown tired of. Every past moment was reinterpreted through this new lens. Things that once seemed minor now felt intentional. What used to be brushed off as personality was suddenly treated as pattern. The emotional breakdown changed everything, not because people suddenly felt sympathy, but because it confirmed something many had already decided. To critics, it looked like guilt cracking through confidence. To supporters, it looked like a human being pushed too far. That split never healed, and it never will. Because once the internet chooses sides, it builds walls instead of bridges. Behind the scenes, the ripple effects started showing. Conversations went quiet, public support thinned even more. People who once spoke up stopped tagging themselves near the situation. Nobody wanted to be pulled into the blast radius. In celebrity culture, controversy is tolerated until it becomes unpredictable. And this had crossed that line. The relationship dynamic between her and Blueface came under harsher scrutiny than ever before. Fans started questioning influence, control, and boundaries in a way they hadn't before. Whether fair or not, people began linking her behavior directly to his public struggles. That association stuck, because narratives don't care about nuance once they're formed. Industry perception shifted subtly but significantly. This wasn't about cancellation. It was about risk assessment. People don't cut ties loudly anymore. They pause, they delay, they stop answering emails as quickly. That kind of quiet hesitation is far more damaging than a public call-out. Because it closes doors without announcing it. Fans also changed how they engaged. They didn't disappear, but their energy shifted. Support turned conditional, praise became cautious, criticism became quicker. Once an audience loses trust, every move feels heavier. Every response feels calculated, even when it's genuine. The most uncomfortable realization was that this moment didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a checkpoint, a moment where the story recalibrated instead of resolved. People weren't waiting for redemption. They were waiting for confirmation. Confirmation that this was either a wake-up call or just another cycle repeating itself. And that expectation became its own kind of pressure. Every public appearance was watched more closely. Every comment was parsed for tone. Silence was treated as strategy. Speaking up was treated as damage control. There was no neutral ground left. Because neutrality doesn't survive public backlash, the internet moved on to the next scandal, as it always does. But this story stayed bookmarked in people's minds. It became a reference point, a remember when moment that would resurface anytime a similar situation appeared. That's how narratives cement themselves quietly and permanently. What made this fallout sting more was the sense that everyone lost something. Fans lost trust, supporters lost certainty, critics lost restraint, and she lost the ability to be perceived without suspicion. Once that's gone, it's nearly impossible to get back. This wasn't just about public pressure exploding. It was about what happens after the explosion, when the dust settles and the cracks are visible, when people stop arguing and start concluding. When sympathy and judgment coexist in an uneasy stalemate. Whether this moment leads to reflection, change, or deeper entrenchment remains to be seen. But one thing is undeniable: the internet doesn't grant unlimited resets. Each meltdown costs more than the last, and each one narrows the path forward. And that's the real aftermath, not the trending tags, not the reaction videos, but the quiet realization that once public opinion flips this hard, the story never truly goes back to how it was. It only evolves into something heavier, more complicated, and far harder to escape. Alright, let's not pretend here. If you made it to this point, you didn't just watch a video. You witnessed the internet turn a spotlight into a pressure cooker. This wasn't casual drama. This was public opinion tightening its grip in real time. And if that didn't make you uncomfortable, then congratulations. You've officially been online too long. Now do what the algorithm understands best and smash that like button like it personally disrespected you. Because likes tell YouTube this conversation actually matters. Drop a comment and say what everyone else is thinking but won't type. Was this accountability? Was it cruelty? Or was it the internet doing what it always does when it smells weakness? Don't tiptoe, say it with your chest. If you're not subscribed yet, that's a risky life choice. Hit subscribe like you're cutting off a toxic group chat. Because this channel doesn't wait for scandals to cool off. When public pressure starts boiling over, We're already here breaking it down while everyone else is still arguing in the comments. Turn on notifications so you don't get caught confused when the next headline drops out of nowhere. Because let's be real, the internet doesn't announce chaos. 1 minute it's quiet, the next minute someone's entire reputation is trending. And you'll want to be early, not late. And don't get it twisted, this story isn't done. Public pressure doesn't disappear. It transforms, it resurfaces. It comes back louder, messier, and harder to ignore. When the next chapter drops, you'll want to remember you were already locked in dots, so stay tapped in, stay curious, and stay ready, because this is CLEB Sync. Where internet outrage meets uncomfortable truth, public meltdowns become permanent narratives. And the next explosion is always loading.